Phrase is, we become by grace what God is by nature. And that is what the Orthodox understand by theosis, divinization, or deification. That we can actually share in God's life in a real, intimate, substantive way.
Yes.
And that's what it means to be holy, and that's what it means to be a Christian.
This might be the most important conversation on masculinity you ever hear from Father Michael. I actually invited him into my own home, and we sat down and talked for nearly 2 hours about all things masculine, what it looks like to be a Christian, what it means to be a man in this day and age.
For Christ says, blessed are those who do and teach, for they should be called great in the kingdom of heaven. You have to do before you can teach. You must do it. Otherwise, you're what? You're a hypocrite.
The thing about Father Michael is he's been an Orthodox priest for 30 years. He's so unconventional. I mean, he's a priest, but he's also a bodybuilder. He's also an entrepreneur. And for someone like me with my background and my love for integration, me and him just hit it off so well. The conversation was so epic, and it's really gonna touch your heart and soul to become the man Christ is calling you to become.
I don't think Christ in the gospel is served by anybody playing small. I don't think St. Paul played small.
How important is courage for men?
Foundational, fundamental. Courage is really the basis of all of our action. It is the perfection of part of the soul, the part of our soul that strives, that has zeal, that presses outward, that, if you'll allow the metaphor, penetrates the world.
And I love the conversation because it's not overly dogmatic. And I just love that. I really feel strongly that Christianity is lacking so much basic psychological integration. And I think it's really going to hurt our culture in the long term if something doesn't change and fast. Be sure to like and leave a comment. What stood out to you? What was your favorite moment? And also, if it touches your heart, maybe share it with a friend. Enjoy this interview with Father Michael.
Some of the breathwork stuff
Yeah, it's great.
I've been real interested in lately. I got to thinking about it. And
You know, I used to teach that.
yeah, I know.
Are
you
you,
did.
are you filming, James? Okay.
Okay, well, good. Yeah, this is
maybe-
interesting stuff.
Yeah, it is kind of just getting ready.
Yeah, just before we get to the
Yeah.
actual questions. But some of the breathwork stuff is interesting to me. I studied last summer with Connor Beaton, who's a well-known
Oh yeah, he does
therapist.
the men's work.
Man
he
Man
does, like,
Talks
a lot
is
of
his
Jungian
podcast.
stuff. Yeah,
He's got some Jungian stuff. He does great work on shadow work, attachment styles, and all of that. And he seems very solid. And just thinking it through, he had us doing breath work at the beginning of every one of our sessions, which, was an interesting thing. I'd never done that much with it, but it got me thinking. And we have tradition in the Orthodox Church of the Jesus
Hesychasm,
prayer being joined with the breath,
Yes.
which I find happens naturally. I mean, the fathers say, don't focus on technique. And I say, yes, sir. So I never did, but I find that naturally, Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, a sinner, is the way the prayer sort of worked. And then as I calmed down and got more focused on the prayer, my breath would slow down, the prayer would slow down, which is a fascinating thing to kind of think about in return. And then even on, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's like when you take rapid inhale and slower exhale, it tends to emphasize the parasympathetic nervous system. Okay, what are monks doing when they chant the Psalms? They're taking a big breath, and then they're chanting through an entire verse of the Psalms in a slow, relaxed exhale.
Right.
And I think that even monastic practices like chanting the Psalms, like in particular in the Western Church, where they would set them to tones and the whole community would chant, I think, they never thought of it in terms of, neural effect or anything. They had no language for that.
Right.
But it calmed them down and it brought them to focus, and they were able to pray better. And so I'm fascinated on how some of these modalities might be consistent with Orthodox practice.
Yeah.
I don't have an answer for that yet.
Yeah.
But talking to people like you, and there's another man of my acquaintance who had long experience in, I guess, sort of the New Age consciousness wing of men's work. Way too much plant medicine in his background, which he has since repented of and reputed. He's on his way into the church now.
Wow.
But he has years of experience with some of this stuff.
Yeah.
And I would just like to know how much of his experience he could use in service to Christ and his church, and what he genuinely needs to leave behind.
Yeah.
And it's an open question for me right now, but it's a fascinating thing. And talking with him is just incredible.
Yeah, it's funny. I've never done plant medicine, but a lot of people say that those deeper breathwork journeys that are like an hour plus long, they mimic a similar
Really?
state. Yeah. It's funny. I still don't fully have an opinion on it. I think right now, as we've kind of talked about coming to Christ and seeing that some of that stuff can just open doors that you need almost like guidance through in a way, where
I could see
where
that.
I've kind of toned it. Where I'm at now is like, instead of an hour-long breathwork journey,
That just
10
seems
minutes.
impossible to me.
10 minutes. Well, it's crazy. After about 20 minutes, your body's intelligence just takes over. You forget where you are, and your body's just naturally breathing. It's quite profound. I mean, I've had experiences that changed me at my core. I mean, that was like the first time I felt like I had a connection with God.
Okay.
I mean, again, whatever that might be, if we're going to use Orthodox theology, maybe it was the energies of God, not the essence. That's kind of my thing. I've come to like accept those experiences were.
Okay.
But I think at the same time with any tool, like you just got to be careful, right? Like it's just, I think if like you're going in to like have an experience, that's already the wrong mindset.
That's the wrong mindset.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I think so. Now I just use like breathwork specifically. It just calms you down, man. I mean, I'm kind of a jittery person, and when I do like those deep, just 10 minutes of diaphragmatic breathing, I mean, you're using the mind to transition the energy into your stomach, which brings all the blood there, and that calms you down. I mean, it's like when you eat a meal, all the energy goes into your stomach to digest it. It's kind of like the same concept. So I'm trying to not like demonize anything anymore, because I think there was a point where I was like, no, like, get away. All of it's evil. But as I'm growing, I'm realizing,
to the degree that it's natural,
yes, exactly.
to the degree that it's biological and rooted in our, in brain chemistry,
Yes.
structure, and function, if it's natural, then it is given to us by God.
Yep.
And is inherently good. So you can use it for wrong things.
Of course.
And you can use it for good things as well. And there's where, some sifting, definitely some guidance is needed.
100%.
And I don't know anybody in the Orthodox world who's got prior experience with these sorts of things, who's able to parse it and all through. I mean, like when I had my panic attack, what was that, like 15 years ago, which was what kind of was, it was one of the times in my life where I hit rock bottom, and it propelled me into the journey that led me into doing much more active men's work than I'm doing now. Yeah. But the very first thing that my therapist taught me to do was how to take a deep breath.
Yeah. 100%.
And he made me practice it, and I thought, my God, what am I doing? I'm paying this man so much. I've just been through a major crisis, and he's having me take breaths. Yeah. And I poo-pooed it up front.
Yeah, a lot of people do.
But I did practice. It did not take 3 days. And I began to feel the effects. And to this day, I can take 2 or 3 deep breaths. I can drop my blood pressure, and I can drop my pulse.
100%.
And it's astonishing to me that you can do that in 10, 15 seconds.
Yeah.
And get out of that sort of, crisis,
Right.
hyper-energized, reactive,
it's fight or
frenzied
flight.
state.
It's fight or flight. I mean, what was I going to say? It's if you look at a baby, I mean, I used to teach breath work. I used to take people through these long journeys. But if you look at a baby and the way a baby breathes, it's breathing in its stomach. Yeah. And, here in the West, in America, I mean, we're like a big experiment, and we're almost like living very unnaturally. So I think people are so stressed, and there hasn't been this level, at least the way I perceive it, through the internet, through the demands of society, men feeling lost, confused, women feeling lost and confused. There's so much stress and anxiety, and our minds are constantly stimulated by social media. It's like this has never happened in history.
Yeah.
So I would argue people's nervous systems are more out of balance than ever. So how do you counterbalance? Well, you got to probably go a little bit into a new direction to like bring back just the baseline. That's how I see it. I mean, I struggled with anxiety from like 13 to 15. I mean, I was having panic attacks every day. And the solution was, well, just put it on a pill. So 14 years old, I was on Xanax.
Yeah.
It's like, what? That's your solution? A Band-Aid?
Yeah.
It's like, you got to get to the
Now
problem.
we're to the point where, you know, your mental health issues and your prescriptions are points of honor on social media.
Right, true. Yeah.
Yeah, it's madness.
Yeah, a whole
It's
problem
madness.
itself, right? People
Yeah.
use it as a way of significance.
So that's all fascinating to me.
Yeah, me too.
There's got to be, in fact, just footnote, I was on a call yesterday, a Zoom call with a number of Orthodox men who are doing men's work.
Love that.
And they weren't quite, I asked, you know, because I didn't mention you by name or the other gentleman I talking about earlier by name, but I said, these are guys who've done men's work in the past. They have some significant experience with this, but it was always in this sort of this new age realm. Okay, and they still would like to be able to use something, but you know, it's still very much an open question how much of that can be used in an Orthodox context and not. So they thought it was fascinating and had not really given it any thought. So I'm still not quite sure what to do with it, but it's wicked fun, ain't it? It's just so much fun to deal with these things.
Well, I think, I mean, I always looked at things through a psychological lens, and you know my background, and you know the people I've worked with. So, you know, Tony Robbins was a big impact on me, and you know, he's a Christian, but he's not dogmatic. Like like his whole thing is like, if it helps and it's good and it makes you a better father, makes you a better husband, helps you, you know, achieve more, give more, love more, then how can it be bad? Like that was always like kind of his method is like, I'm going to grow psychologically so I can serve at a higher level. So, I mean, for me, I would say breathwork like cured my anxiety. I mean, so it's like, how is that, you know, negative? So I think it's one of those things.
Yeah, I think some of it comes from, oh, well, you know, that's used in yoga, or that
Right,
comes
exactly.
from Far Eastern
Yes.
philosophies, or
And
you know, or alien religious practices. Ergo, it must be demonic.
Right.
So, you know, breathing rapidly is somehow a bad thing for you because you know there is a meditation or breathing practice. Well, but you know, some of the fathers say also, if you're really anxious, say the Jesus prayer really fast.
Right. And what is that? It's breath.
Okay, that's rapid breathing too, you know? So,
Yeah.
all right, you know, that's slightly more sympathetic and less fearful, reactive
Right.
engagement with these ideas might open up some possibilities. So anyway, that's what I'm interested in looking at.
Yeah, it's an interesting conversation, and I think from a priest perspective, you know, you're going to have a different level of discernment and understanding probably than the average person. So I think it'd be great.
Well, wasn't that a way to start off?
Yeah. So I guess we'll figure out where to place this in all of this. But so you've been a priest for 30 years?
I've been a priest for 30 years.
Okay.
Yes.
And you're also a bodybuilder.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I was on stage for 10 years. I competed
Wow, 10 years.
12 times.
Wow.
Yeah. Once nationally, tried to get a pro card. Came in third or last.
Hey, it's the
Just
effort.
full honest disclosure, you know, okay. But yeah, and I started late. I started at 53
Wow.
when I did. So I competed until I was 62. And so, you know, I never looked like the young bucks. So, you know, I never looked like C-Bum or, you know, or Arnold or anything. But I looked pretty good for a 60-year-old man. And it was something that I had always wanted to do since I remember being 8 years old and seeing the Charles Atlas ads in the back of comic books. I don't know, this might date me too much, but you know,
It does for me,
We
but I know what you're talking
we
about.
had comic books when I was a child.
Right.
It's like graphic novels, but they were real cheap. And in the back there were ads, and there was this little cartoon ad of this guy on the beach and some bully coming by and kicking sand in his face, and he couldn't stand up to him, and his girlfriend blows him off because he's a wimp, and he kicks over the chair to risk a 3-cent stamp. This is how old it was, okay, a 3-cent stamp to send off for the Charles Atlas course. So he builds up his body and gives the bully his due, you know, the next time he's at the beach and all. But I thought, you know, that's beautiful. I would love to look like that. And when I was 8 was the same year that my father died. And so I think I was looking for some kind of masculine strength so that perhaps I might be stronger and might live longer than my dad did or something. I've tried parsing the psychology of my appreciation, of bodybuilding for years, and I've never come up with anything except that there is an aesthetic to the human form, both male and female, and I just wanted to embody it myself and see how far I could go. And I had pushed myself intellectually. As I went to university, I got my PhD. I think I've pushed myself spiritually. You can always do better, but I think I've done okay. I said, what would it be like to push myself physically? And I decided I would do it. And one day I said, I got tired of being old, gray, fat, and ugly, was basically it.
Were you actually fat? Were you...
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I was the fat kid in school.
Wow.
Always picked last for team sports. To this day, I do not care for a single team sport.
Wow.
Because I was uncoordinated. I nearly failed PE in the 2nd grade because I could not jump a rope.
Wow.
I remember my mother went and bought one and made us practice at home. How embarrassing is that? And always picked last for tag football in school or anything else. So I hated team sports and could never do it. And I lost some weight in high school and then again in college and all. But in my 30s, I developed the dad bod. I'd gotten married. And so, really, I remember it. When I was 34, I had a 34-inch waist. When I was 36, I had a 36-inch waist. Well, by the time I was 38, I had a 38-inch waist. I was pushing a 40-inch waist, weighing it at about 198 pounds. And finally I said, to hell with this. I don't want to look like this. I feel awful. I look awful. I'm embarrassed by my body. I had always wanted to get into shape. And 45 years after I decided that I liked the look of a bodybuilder, I finally said, I'm going to do something about it.
What was that tipping point? Because it sounds like you had the idea since you were young.
I had the idea, and I don't know quite what it was, but I was 53, and maybe it was just, look, if I don't do this now, I'm going to be too old to do it. So I better seize it. And I was feeling a little better. Again, so this is 10 years. This was like 4 years after the panic attack. I'd already begun working on time management and early stage self-development stuff. And this was just one of the pieces that folded into it. And I saw, I don't even remember where, someone online, there was a guy a good old boy out of Texas. So I liked him immediately because I'm a native Texan. And online training program. It was one of the first online 12-week personal transformation or physical transformation programs I had seen. So he was really early on. It was his first cohort, so I got it for like half price. It was only $200, the 12 weeks. And I said to my wife, I says, I want to do this. I want to get in shape. Let me see how far I can do this. Awesome. And I said, I need you to be willing to change what we eat. Will you support me? She says, I'll support you. Okay, so I sent in my money.
That's awesome.
And I mean, I had been the middle-aged guy. I'd always been in the gym, but I was the middle-aged dad who always pumped iron and never got any stronger, who was always on the elliptical and never lost any fat. It is remarkable how many years you can do the same damned thing and not make any difference. It's that, the definition of crazy comes back to mind, but I must have been crazy, And once I got together, his name, actually, swear to God, his name was Chad.
Oh my God, that's hilarious.
How appropriate now.
That's awesome.
It was not, the Chad meme hadn't come out then yet, but I worked with Chad. And I realized I was not eating nearly enough protein. So just that, like doubling or tripling the amount of protein that I ate, made a huge difference. And then for the rest, it was calorie regulation and a much more aggressive, progressive weightlifting program. So I was really pushing the weights and trying to raise the weight every single workout. And remarkably, the fat started coming off and the muscle started going on. And in the course of 12 weeks, I lost 13 pounds. And I was significantly stronger. Yeah, it was a pound a week. Yeah. And so I said to myself, I wonder how far I can take this.
You
How
got a
far
little
can
bit
I
of that
push
dopamine.
this?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I said, I pushed myself intellectually, pushed myself spiritually. Let me push my body as far as it will go. So I said, who here does a contest? Says, that's it. I work real well with a deadline. And I thought, they have men's physique category where they wear board shorts. And I thought to myself, I could probably wear board shorts in front of strangers. Seriously.
That's hilarious.
It was hilarious, but I mean, I was ashamed to take off my shirt.
Wow. Yeah. So
I actually had to practice that because, going on stage presence is part of it. And you have to sort of, if you'll pardon the mild vulgarity, you have, my coach told me you have to step on stage and come out dick first. You have to show confidence and poise and all of this. And I was like,
right.
And I'm a priest. I'm used to sort of being modest and unassuming and all of that. So
Right.
I had to practice
Wow.
standing up and sort of swaggering a little bit. It was alien.
That's awesome.
He still laughs about it to this day because it says it was one of the most memorable ones he ever had. Because here's little me, sort of my mousy sort of way. Well, I'd like to do a contest. Do you think it's sort of bucket list thing? Do you think maybe I could do that?
Wow.
And he said to me, I can't guarantee you'll win, but I can guarantee that you will look like you belong on stage. I said, sweet.
Right.
That's more than reasonable. In 10 months, I lost 40 pounds. I lost 8 inches off my waist.
Wow.
I went from 23 to 8% body fat. I saw my abs for the first time in my life. I have
That's
nice abs.
awesome.
I had like giant ravioli. I got great abs when you can see them. And, it was like Christmas every day when they finally appeared. It says, my God, this is what God has given me, and I've covered it up all my life. And I just said, oh, please don't let me be last. I don't want to be last. I was 5th out of 6.
Hey.
I was not last.
Let's go.
So it was, yes, and I got the bug for competing. They said, once you compete once, you'll want to do it again. So I went from men's physique to I finally added in classic physique because that allowed me to do a posing routine. You had to wear much less. And then finally, after a year or so of that, he said, let's just do bodybuilding. And I tell you what, stepping on stage as a bodybuilder, wearing that little scrap of spandex,
Yeah.
was the scariest thing I've done in ages.
Very vulnerable.
Extremely vulnerable. And I discovered I don't have nearly as much fear as a result of that than I did before. I was astonished that it had that effect on me. But it was because it was something I'd always wanted. Oh, classic physique, that's very close to it, but somehow it wasn't quite bodybuilding. That's not what Arnold and Franco did, and Frank back in the day when I saw Pumping Iron, because I'm old enough to remember the 80s and, Tom Platz and his huge legs and all that. So, but I did that, and I actually went to nationals one year tried to get my pro card, and that year I hit 5% body fat. And I looked pretty good, and I appreciated that. And then the last prep I did a couple of years ago, it was miserable. I felt horrible. The fat didn't come off. The mental strain was almost unendurable. My wife complained. For the first time, my wife complained. And I said, okay. And I couldn't get below 8%. And I sort of came in last, and I said, Coach and I agreed, man, you can't go to nationals looking like this. So I sort of hung up the trunks and laid it aside. So now I have been invited to judge.
Oh, wow.
So I'm looking forward to doing
cool.
so instead of being on stage, I'm sitting down, I can sit down front, and I'll be able to do some judging. And it's good to be, and this is maybe insight for those who aren't clergy, in all Orthodox circles, because I am a priest, there's always this power differential. I'm the priest, I'm one of them. I wear the costume, I stand up at the altar and all of that. So there's always this distance and this differential, this respect and a little bit of hands-off attitude about me. And, I've been at it for a long time, but it's really nice to be in a community where the title and the position mean nothing. And people just treat me as Mike.
Yeah.
And they're the people also who will tell me to my face when I'm full of it.
Wow.
And when and Ramey was always real good. He never, he respected me as a priest, but I was he was my client, I was his client, he was my coach, and if he said to me, Mike, you're not doing it, 45 minutes of cardio twice a day. And I said, oh, yes, sir. And I'd go and do it, but he pulled no punches, and I need that. Men need that. They need coaches, friends, people who will tell truth, speak truth straight from the shoulder.
Yeah.
And we're so wishy-washy nowadays and so careful of everybody's feels that it's very difficult to get men who will speak truth in your life. And clergy need that too. So, anyway, that's the very long story of
I love
my
it.
Bodybuilding career.
Yeah, I love it for a few reasons. I think number one, when people think of a priest, they have all of these dogmas, these presuppositions, and I can definitely see like the pedestal thing as well. And there's a beauty in that, right? Like respecting somebody who has devoted their entire life to Christ,
and respect for the office which I hold.
Right.
Worthily or unworthily, I am still a priest.
Yeah.
And that in itself is worthy of respect.
Absolutely.
I get that.
It's a hard path, really. It's a lot of devotion. But what I love is like you still have this humanness to you, right? You still have these like innocent desires to be like a bodybuilder and do these things that push you to an edge in a different way. And that was something that stuck out to us in our very first conversation we had, was like I was kind of in call it a funk, just a little mindset funk, where I was having poor what's the word I want to use? I was having like misconceptions about ambition, and I was almost tying it to something negative, because I'm a very ambitious person, and I feel like one of my top values is growth, like just as a dominant, like I've always been growth oriented and trying to push. And I feel like becoming a Christian and then getting mixed into some Christian circles, and you hear so many different opinions, it was almost like, is this bad? Like, is this bad that I'm that ambitious? Is this bad that I, have these like skills and I can use them in all these ways to make money and help people? It was like I was so in my head. And I don't know, there was something about our first conversation where it was almost like you just kind of, I guess, give me permission to say like, look, this isn't a bad thing. It's like I think you shared like the parables of the talents and things like that. And I was like, man, that's so awesome. And then to see that not only do you say that to me, but you live it in your own life in your own way outside of the church, there was something in me that could really trust that. It was like, he's a human and he wants what's best for me, and he's not going to like shun these masculine qualities. Cause I feel like in Christian circles, there's kind of this, meekness that is very misunderstood. And I think we're seeing that play out at a mass scale in our society in a very big way, in Christian circles included, which I think is why a lot of men are drawn to Orthodoxy.
Yes.
So yeah, I know I just threw a lot there, but
that is huge, and I think you're right on every score. Let me see, to address a number of the issues. Yeah, first off, I think I also shared with you that one issue in Orthodox spirituality is that most of our spiritual literature was written by monks for monks.
Right.
And so translating that into terms that a layman can understand and live can be a little difficult.
For sure.
And so we read monkish virtues and then try to translate them into lay life. Monks, take vows of poverty, so, they're completely anti-money and don't give much thought to it. Right. But on the other hand, every monastery that I know of lives on the donations of Christians who are out in the world making bank.
Right, doing something
productive, adding value to the world. So, if there weren't Christians out there killing it in the job market, they wouldn't have, income in order to give to monasteries too. So, even, I'm not saying monks are parasitic, not by any means, but
no, I know what you're saying.
But, they do live, because Christians are doing well in the world, and so monks manage to do better as well. And I don't think anyone is served. I don't think Christ in the gospel is served by anybody playing small. I don't think St. Paul played small
No.
when he went and preached the gospel.
No.
I don't think Cyril and Methodius played small when they went and evangelized the Slavs. I don't think there is, even St. Paul speaks in his epistles, several times about parousia, boldness, in preaching the gospel. So, when we're well grounded in Christ and we can speak, speak truth honestly and from conviction because we have experienced the love of God ourselves, this gives us the ability to speak boldly about such things. And I think for everyone who has a gift and a talent, not everyone is called to a specifically religious vocation. So, but use the gifts and talents you've been given to make the world a better place. And yes, go make lots of money because you can do more good with it. As you said, just, what was it, a couple of weeks ago, I was down at Bedros Keuilian Live presenting, and it was one of the things that Bedros mentions in passing. It's like he gives prodigiously to Shriners Hospital for Children.
That's awesome.
He himself suffered physical and sexual abuse when he was a child in Armenia, and he has a real soft spot in his heart for children who suffer.
Wow.
He's given like $4 million.
That's so beautiful.
In
So
one of
beautiful.
his supplement line, every time you order supplements from his company, $1 goes to Shriners Children's Hospital. It's just what he does. And very often he'll do these little challenges. So every dollar you give, to this or that, I will match it, and every penny will go. And the reason he's able to do it is because, he's worth 9 figures. I think
realize
about,
he was
I
that
think he's worth,
wow.
that's about 7 companies, so he's worth about $200 million.
Good for him.
And you can do a huge amount of good,
Right.
when you have control of that kind of assets.
Yes.
And he does.
That's awesome.
So again, money, like masculine qualities, are amoral. It takes a man of character or a man of bad character to use them for good or for evil.
Right.
So I think in themselves they're largely neutral.
Yes.
I can see the temptation in having money.
Well, you just can't worship.
Not that I have much. If I wanted to be rich, I wouldn't be a priest. So I've never been fabulously wealthy, but I've been around people who do extremely well.
Yeah.
And so long as they're people of character, they're wonderful, and they're very generous.
Yes.
They're very generous. So, I think that's largely it. Let's use what we have maximally. Look, you gave me 5 talents, I made you 5 talents more. Sweet. Sort of my motto is 10 talents more. We got 10 now, let's go out and double that again. And do as much as we can. And so long as it's, as long as it's not immoral, you're not cheating or hurting anybody. Like I think it's fine. And then it allows us to do huge good. So there is that. With regards to sort of the softening of masculine qualities in society and in the church, it's long been a lot of what is traditional masculinity and the strengths of men, you're right, have been vilified in the culture.
Big time.
It's all toxic masculinity until the manure hits the air conditioner, or Houston gets flooded, or there's fires in California or something, and then, we just love the heroes and the men who are willing to go. I always remember there was the now nearly forgotten mass shooting in, it was Las Vegas, I think. Yeah, Las Vegas.
Oh, yeah, that was wild.
And the number of stories about all of the men who threw themselves on top of their wives or their girlfriends. And that's a spontaneous thing. It's not like, I wonder, should I protect? No, we do it automatically.
Right. It's innate.
It is innate. It's an instinct.
Yep.
And this is a beautiful, and some guys died to save their women. There's probably evolutionary biological reasons why that's the case.
It's a testosterone thing.
It's a testosterone thing.
But still, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, it does not matter.
matter.
But men do these things. But it gets vilified until it's needed. And there seems to be also, and I was never a Protestant, and I'm not going to play one, here talking to you. But there a number of reports that the Protestant churches seem largely feminized, because I understand that the attendance is like 2/3 female in the Protestant world. I think it's also about 2/3 female in the Catholic Church as well. So they're catering to their audience, which makes perfect sense. Right. But what it does is often there's a kind of softening, as you say, that some men find uncomfortable. I personally never found sort of the very emotive kind of worship that you often find in, like, especially the larger evangelical box churches. I've personally found it kind of cringe, but apparently a lot of men find that perfectly acceptable and wonderful and attractive. Maybe it's the only place where they can be emotive, and emotionally free and expressive, the only place in their lives, which, God bless them if they've got that, or that's the place where they can do it and be comfortable and free. It may be part of the attraction. But it still seems there's a great deal of feminization in it. And you're right. I think in the last, I would say about 6 years, it actually started before COVID lockdown, young men began coming to the Orthodox Church. At first a trickle, but now it's a flood, and they're coming by the thousands, and have thousands. I mean, in the last 3 or 4 years, it's actually become a flood. I mean, I know one of the priests in Salt Lake City, he's got like 49 catechumens, my old friend, Father Moses McPherson, who's down in Austin now, with some small notoriety these days, like 75 catechumens.
That is awesome.
Yeah, and so you start multiplying this across the world. I know our church, I know of at least 3 congregations in my diocese that are having to build new churches because they're bursting at the seams.
Yes.
And it's all young men bringing young families in, sometimes, husbands and wives with 1 or 2 children below school age. And the reasons why, I think men are looking for something to believe in. They're looking for meaning. They're looking for a transcendent purpose, something big to give their lives to. And if they're going to come to Christ in his church, they want a church that feels big and transcendent and holy, and we have that in spades.
Yeah. Definitely.
Secondly, they're looking for structure.
Yes. That's
And
huge.
Orthodoxy has lots of structure.
It does.
Which, some people think, oh, it's a straitjacket. I mean, but it's not. And
It seems like that on the appearance.
it seems like that on
But
the
it's really
outside.
not.
It's not. There is extraordinary freedom inside of it, but you have to learn the structure and the form first, and then there's freedom within it.
Yes.
But the reason for the structure is that I think a lot of young men come to us very chaotic, very unstructured, and frightened, and not quite sure what to do with themselves in the world. And because the church provides structure, it provides an external structure that helps them hold together until they are able to internalize structure again in their own lives. So it provides an external framework for them to get themselves together and to work it all out, get their feet under themselves, and then they're much better. And by that time, they've learned to interiorize the structure that the church provides in a rule of prayer, the fasting disciplines, the cycle of services, all of that kind of stuff. And it begins to inform their lives and provide for stability and a rhythm and a pulse of life that gives meaning to every day and the week and the seasons of the year. So I think it's a transcendent purpose. I think it's the structure. And also Orthodoxy has a personal quality that seems not to be as prominent in the Western confessions. And that is that there is a close personal relationship with one's spiritual father.
Yeah.
If
That
you're
makes
at
a
all
huge difference.
if you're at all serious up in the Orthodox Church, and are really close to your spiritual father.
Yes.
It's usually your parish priest, but not necessarily. And footnote, I have known people who have had great spiritual mothers as well.
Oh,
because,
interesting.
yes, that is.
Is that the priest's wife? Would that
No, not
technically
necessarily the
just-
priest's wife. I had one of my best friends when I was an undergraduate. I was in graduate school. He had just finished his PhD, and his parish had a spiritual mother. She was just an older woman in the parish. She actually had 5 children,
Wow.
but she would get up every morning at 5 a.m., sit in her rocking chair, and say the Jesus prayer for an hour before her family woke up.
Wow.
And she was regarded as the spiritual authority in the parish.
That's awesome.
And the priest had sense enough to recognize this is a charism and a gift. She's got it more than me. So she provided direction, and people would come to him for confession. And he would not contradict what she had said. And in Orthodoxy, we recognize this. So, that's why
That's
simple.
really cool.
Yeah, that's
I
why
love
simple monks, maybe, that are not priests, but simple monks can be great spiritual fathers, but they send you to the priest for confession and absolution and all. Okay. But usually it's the parish priest, but you know somebody, and so for a lot of the younger guys, the priest is going to be older, and I recognize my role as Dad 2.0
Right.
for these younger guys.
Right.
You know, because they want a mentor or a teacher or a coach or somebody to tell them, you're mucking it up, quit doing that, be accountable for this, as well as an encouragement, a constant encouragement, and they want an older man's blessing. And that's not necessarily, you know, a formal priest's blessing. They want an older man to see them, to understand them, to accept them, to embrace them, and to tell them, you're going to be okay. You got this. I believe in you. And when men have that, when I have had that, my God, you can't hold me back. You know, you hit the ground running and you can go a hell of a long way, you know, on a single encounter like that. And so I try to provide that for the guys that come to me. And any priest worth his salt is going to recognize that. And no, we don't look for it. You know, somebody say, oh, you just want to be a guru. You're looking to be, you know, you're hanging out your shingle to be a holy elder. No, anybody who looks for disciples, flee. That is one of the first signs that you've got a fake elder there, is someone gathering disciples. I don't gather disciples. We don't do any advertising. These guys are coming to the church on their own.
Right.
And if they come to me, well and good, I accept who God gives me.
Yeah.
You know, but if they want to go somewhere else, that's fine too.
Wow.
I'm just, you know, here for the encounter, you know, when it happens and it works. I remember there were a couple of guys who were, for a while, were coming to confession very regularly, like every Saturday night. And, okay, I respect anybody's conscience. You want to confess? Here I am. Lay it out. And I got to thinking, this is a little frequent for what they're confessing. But then I noticed quickly, like they would confess, I would put the stole on their head, I would say the prayer of absolution, and then they would just sort of stand there and shuffle their feet. And I thought, what is going on? Then I realized they wanted a hug.
That's adorable.
They just wanted a hug. They somehow missed sort of that masculine energy and all. And when I realized that, I said,
That's beautiful.
and I gave them a hug. And it's like the first few times that I realized that this happened, they would just melt. And I said, okay, that's what they're really after here. And the only place they can find that. And it makes sense, because in confession, there's this intimacy where, you know, the person confessing genuinely opens his heart. Yes. And, you know, if you make a good confession, you're opening your heart to Christ. It is a holy moment when you stand there and witness this kind of vulnerability and intimacy. And, you know, either the priest is going to withdraw, you're going to react and just pull back because you can't deal with it, or it's going to open my heart too. So it's one of the most intimate and open and human experiences for me to stand in awe and watch this person open his or her heart to Christ. And there's this deep moment of human intimacy there. And so, yeah, you know, if it ends in a hug, well and good. You know, we're always chaste with it. You know, there's always someone else in the church. Sometimes people worry about, you know, having too close of a physical contact with other people and all of that sort of stuff. But I made it
instinctual. You know?
It's an instinctual thing. I know who I can get and do that with.
Right.
I know who wants it, and I know who doesn't want it. And there are always other people in the church.
Right, of course.
This is, you know, for my own safety, I make sure there's at least a reader reading the Psalms who is cognizant of who's around and what's going on.
Oh wow, during confession.
Even during
cool.
confessions.
I love that.
I am never alone in the church with
Yeah.
anybody.
That's smart.
So they may be on the other side and, like I say, engage with something.
Right,
So it's not
right.
like they're paying any close attention.
No, I see
But
what
at
you're
least we're there, and that makes a safe environment for everybody. So it allows us to relax and not to be worried, you know, during it, because that just creates tension and distance.
Yeah, you said something about a little earlier about the structure of the church and that kind of kingly. You know, based off my background, I naturally am going to look at things through like the archetypes, and we've talked about this a little bit.
Yeah.
And it's like the structure that the king energy, we can call it Christ, we can call it the church, brings men.
Oh yes,
is transformative. I mean, that's what I felt when I went to an Orthodox liturgy the first time. It was just like order. I don't know how to explain it, like just order.
Yes.
And that was affecting me spiritually, psychologically, maybe even physically for all we know. And I thought that was profound, you know.
It is.
And it's cool when you can have a priest like yourself who kind of understands that and embodies that role as the head of the church, because from an archetypal standpoint, it's so transformative to young men because they need that structure. I remember reading Warrior, King, Magician, Lover. And in that book, it talks about how there would be like these schizophrenic people, and they would sit with a psychologist, and they would kind of have these like visions of, you know, kings and queens, and what their mind was reaching for.
And mandalas.
Was, yeah, something like that. The mandalas, yeah, was that order, right? And I forget exactly what happens, but somehow the psychologist helped them integrate that in to where it was like, you need that kingly energy. Like, what is that king providing for you? What's it trying to show you? And I think a lot of men, they don't come in contact with that, and that's why they stay boys. And that was my experience with Christ.
Okay.
It was like, he's the ultimate king. Like, he's the King of Kings. So it was like my model of masculinity wasn't complete. It was like I had magicians who were very evolved in their masculinity, but they were lacking like a healthy king, and they kind of turned into a tyrant. So it was like I always had this very poor relationship to powerful men. And it was like, once I came to Christ, it was like, whoa.
That
But
genuine
then Orthodoxy,
genuinity.
yeah, but the Orthodox, like, because it was like I was Protestant for a couple of years, Catholic, but then it was like something about Orthodoxy. It was so different because I feel like it's the fullness of the faith, and there's like such a mystical dimension even to the church and the way it's structured. I'm like, gosh, I love it because it speaks to everything I understand psychologically, but Christianizes it, if you will.
Yes.
And that's what helped me draw the conclusion that it's not that things are pulling from, or it's not that, or what I'm trying to say is that everything in the world, wisdom-wise, first pulls from Christianity. That's pretty much what I've concluded, whether it knows it or not. Pulls from Christ.
There's this ancient logical error called post hoc ergo propter hoc. After this, therefore, because of it.
Okay.
And so there was, like, some of the early Christian apologists said, well, Moses was before Plato and Aristotle, therefore Moses and Plato took from, or Plato and Aristotle took from Moses the idea of the one God. Right. Well, no. Nobody in Athens, or in Greece was reading Hebrew, at the time. But I think there are things that are fundamentally true, that are true in reality, that are true in the structure of reality, that are true because God has ordered the world in this way. And in Orthodox theology, the world embodies all of these divine energies, being, truth, beauty, goodness, order, structure, life, all of those things. And so anybody who is genuinely attuned to it is going to be drawn towards God. And I'm not espousing a perennialism where there are many paths up the mountain. I think Christ is the ultimate embodiment and the fulfillment of all of that. But even back in the 2nd century, Saint Justin the philosopher and martyr said, "What is true is Christian." Right. So let's find. I tell people you can find Christ in a math equation. That's really, profound. If 2 plus 2 equals 4, it's because there's logos there, and it reflects reality, and there is truth. And it's maybe a very small thing, right. But somehow, if it's true, it's Christian. And because Christ is the way, the truth, and the life. So he's embodied in all of it. So wherever people are able to access genuine truth, whether they know it or not, they found 100%. Christ.
100%.
Yeah. So I forgot how I got onto that. Oh, and then, yes, and with regards to the structure of the church, it's not just, I was speaking earlier about, structure like practices and aspects of Orthodox observance.
Well, it's both.
It's both.
Right. That's what I mean.
I mean, the very structure of an Orthodox temple is designed to embody heaven and earth and the intersection of those two things. It is a microcosm of reality. And so simply to stand in a well-constructed Orthodox temple naturally orders the soul.
Yes.
Because we're in an ordered, structured environment the way that is natural for us.
Yep.
So this is why, you go into a church and say, oh, my, it feels so good to be here.
I know.
And it's not just sort of nostalgia or sentimentality. It's,
No.
everything is in its right place. I am in my right place now.
Yeah, it's the
And
proper ordering.
the proper ordering,
so
and I
true.
know where I'm supposed to be, and this is it. I can relax now.
Yes.
It's beautiful.
It really is.
And then even, as you say, in the liturgy, there are one of the things that particularly struck me in Orthodoxy is because my undergraduate degree was in psychology, and a lot of, the department had two schools of thought in it, existential phenomenological. So I read a huge amount of Husserl, Dilthey, Merleau-Ponty, Sartre, and Heidegger. But also we had, the department chair was James Hillman, who was the head of the Jung Institute in Zurich for 15 years.
Wow.
So we had a very strong archetypal train of thought in the department as well. So I got a huge amount of archetypal psychology as an undergraduate. When I encountered the Orthodox Church, I said, oh my God, this is simply a pre-modern, pre-enlightenment way of understanding the world, and it felt completely natural to me.
Yep.
And so, I recognize, like the first time I saw, for example, a bishop serving as a hierarch for the divine liturgy, he starts in the center of the church. He comes into the middle, they vest him in the middle in garments, and we say, oh yeah, he's dressed like a Byzantine emperor, which I think, yes, and the Turks did that to us. But think about it. He is embodying sacral kingship. He is the image of Christ. He's also dressed like the Byzantine emperor. So you have a literal king and Christ religious sacred king image. And what's one of the first things he does when they get him all vested and before he begins the liturgy? He takes these two candlesticks with 2 and 3 candles, the decury and the triquery, and he blesses in the 4 directions, the 4 cardinal directions.
Wow.
Which is extending a blessing to the entire cosmos. It's not just localized in the church. He constitutes a center, an axis mundi. The church becomes the center of the universe, and the sacred king, embodying Christ, extends the blessing of God to the whole cosmos. It brings order to everything. And I could see this from the beginning. People are still astonished when I explain that nowadays, because most people don't quite think in those terms,
Right,
but
right.
I was trained to. And so I see what's going on, and it's no wonder that people feel good in an Orthodox church, because it touches these deep chords. And this is how you know something is visceral and archetypal, because it feels right and comfy, even if it's like visceral, pre-verbal. You may not even have words for it, but it works.
Yes.
And you feel something, and you know that it's right. And that's the way I felt Orthodoxy when I first came into the church. I still remember that the first time I attended an Orthodox church service. Yeah. And that was it. Ordered, centered, natural, doing something much deeper than what appeared on the surface.
Yes.
And in fact, I've only been able to discover 5 layers of meaning in the Divine Liturgy. I'm sure there's more, but I've found only 5 of things that are going on. And sometimes in the fall, if there's not much else going on, I'll do a series of sermons
Oh, cool.
on that sort of thing. This is what we're doing here at this point.
Yeah.
Just like at the little entrance where the priest or the bishop carries the gospel book, comes out and carries the gospel book formally in procession and literally enthrones it on the altar. Yeah. Okay? Originally, that's when the liturgy began. Books were rare and expensive. They were handwritten, Roman authorities stole Christian books, confiscated them, and burned them. So you didn't leave them sitting around churches. The bishop kept the gospel book in his personal possession, which is why in icons of bishops, they always hold a gospel book, because traditionally the bishop held the gospel. So when the bishop came in the church, he would bring the gospel book with him, put it on the altar, and they would start the service. That was the beginning of the service in ancient times. Okay. If the Word of God does not take up residence in our hearts, then carrying the gospel book in formal procession in the liturgy and laying it on the altar, which is an image of the human heart, then all we have is a bunch of pretty Byzantine choreography that's not really accomplishing anything.
Right.
It has to work in here,
Yes.
as well as working there in the church, and because it's also working eternally in heaven, because there is only one liturgy which Christ is doing eternally in heaven. That's the book of Revelation. Chapters 4 through 6 describes the divine liturgy going on in heaven. And so it goes on eternally in heaven. We do the same thing here on earth because it's that liturgy that's being enacted here. And when it takes place in the human heart, that's when real deep transfiguration takes place. That's where the real stuff happens. And you cannot manufacture that. You can only optimize the conditions under which a person can come to encounter the living God, in hopes that when God is ready and moves the human heart, you've optimized the conditions where a person can respond to it. And it happens often enough.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I get all excited about that and go on and on and on.
I love it. Orthodoxy has such a depth. It's so hard to comprehend, and yet you don't need, like, I try to understand everything, but sometimes I just say, you know what, I don't need to understand.
You don't need to understand at all.
Just experience it, right?
Yeah,
just embrace the experience.
Well, the late Archbishop or Metropolitan Callistos Ware said it simply: Orthodoxy is life. And it's just life, okay? So you have to live it. You can't study it.
No. Yeah.
And because a lot of it is archetypal and deep and operating on levels for which we have no words.
Right.
Then simply trying to study it from the outside will get you you'll only scratch the surface.
Right.
I mean, look, I have a PhD in this stuff.
Right.
I took the academic intellectual route
Right.
when I first encountered Orthodoxy. And it works for a while. And it's wicked fun.
It
you
is.
know, until you develop attitude and you want to get pugnacious and fight heretics online and all, and then you can really become a problem and are not bearing good witness to Christ.
Very true.
But I also realized after a while that, no, I didn't really need to read the Fathers more. I needed to pray more. I needed to show up and be attentive to the liturgy. I needed to work on my own heart. I needed to uproot my own passions. Yeah. And the more I did those things, the clearer my soul became. The light of Christ shone all the more clearly in me, and I knew by experience what the Holy Fathers wrote about.
Right.
And I could prove it in my own life. In a small way, sure.
Of
but
course.
Enough to say,
it's real.
It's real. They know what they're talking about. If I can understand this much, I'm going to trust them with a little bit more and just do what they say I need to do. And
love that.
It's, I've never looked back.
Yeah. Yeah. Taste and see.
Taste and see. Yeah, exactly.
Taste and see.
And, even, it says there in the Sermon on the Mount where Christ says, blessed are those who do and teach, for they should be called great in the kingdom of heaven. You have to do before you can teach.
Yes.
You must do it. Otherwise, you're what? You're a hypocrite.
Yeah.
And if you're a hypocrite, your words lack power.
Yes.
And you won't change anybody. So if you can speak from your own experience, and this is organic. You take this stuff, you bring it into your own life, you assimilate it, and then you sort of, use a feminine metaphor. It's like you give it back as milk almost. You're able to nourish somebody else with this teaching because it's yours now, and it's the tradition, but you've embodied the tradition yourself, and so it has an authenticity and a realness to it, that it's not just theoretical and in books,
right.
And intellectual.
Yeah. It's funny because that exact thing in the reverse is what kept me away from Christianity. Obviously, I didn't know about Orthodoxy when I was younger, but it just seemed to me that it was always about, like, I'm holier than thou because of what I believe. And that always didn't make sense to me with a spiritual background. Like, my whole pursuit from a young age was to embody the wisdom, not just have intellectual beliefs, and that somehow makes you justified in front of God. So I always really struggled with, like, the evangelical model of, like, salvation and how they kind of look at Christianity as a whole. And it just kept me away. I was like, those people, like, and again, I was judging, right? It was total judgment. I was like, but they don't really understand spirituality. I mean, again, I can't broad stroke it like that, but that was my experience. But then what's made me start thinking about Christianity was people I had met that didn't tell me they were Christian, but they were different, and I didn't know how to pinpoint it. I was like, there's just something like light and bordering holy. And I was like, I always used to tell myself, like, wow, if I could just get an ounce of whatever that is, because I was so inspired by like their connection to God. I just never had seen something like that. And then I found out they're all Christians, but they walk it. They don't just tell you what to believe. They didn't even tell me they were Christian. It was just the way they lived. And I heard something, I don't know, you would know, like, I think one of the saints said, like, you don't need to evangelize. If you become a saint, you touch like 10,000 lives or 100,000
Saint
lives.
Seraphim of Sarov.
What'd he say?
Acquire the spirit of peace, and 1,000 souls around you will be saved.
Wow. Yeah, see, that just hits me.
The one attributed to Francis of Assisi. Preach the gospel always, use words if you have to.
Ah, yes. Yes, that's exactly it for me. And those are things that I was like, ooh, Orthodoxy isn't just a matter of having new ideas in your head. It's about transforming and becoming more like God, like not in a hierarchical, I'm going to become God sense.
Oh no, but
like
it is in there.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Like your humanness can be transformed to become more like Christ.
Yeah,
And
the
that to
$10
me, yeah.
the $10 phrase is, we become by grace what God is by nature.
Right.
And that is what the Orthodox understand by theosis,
Yes.
divinization, or deification.
Yes.
That we can actually share in God's life in a real, intimate, substantive way.
Yes.
And that's what it means to be holy, and that's what it means to be a Christian.
Yes. Yes.
And to your earlier point, yeah, faith has two components. I mean, even old Tommy Aquinas, knew this back in the scholastic era. Right. The faith is intellectual. It has an intellectual component. So there's intellectual assent to a set of propositions, like we believe the creed. I believe in one God, the Father Almighty, maker of heaven and earth. So there is an intellectual assent. But fidelity is also a matter of the will. So I am faithful to Christ, meaning I will never go whoring after another God. I will never, seek out, you are our God, we know no other than thee. And so there is a faithfulness in that respect, and that I would never do anything to offend him. Yes. And it's like being faithful to my wife. I would never look at another woman in a way that disrespected my wife. It just would not happen. And so that's faithfulness as well. So it's that aspect of the will of being, you are my God, I am your man, and I will always be your man. And I will stand with you even when I don't understand what you're doing to me and why things are so miserable and wretched right now.
Right.
I'm going to trust that you've got this under control.
It's like Job.
Like Job. And that's part of it too. Yeah. So it's not just knowing the right things, but sticking with it through thick and thin. The Lord gives, the Lord takes away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Precisely Job.
Right.
Yeah.
Ah, so beautiful. I think something I still battle with, and I'd love to hear your insight on it, because I think a lot of spiritual men struggle with this, is how much of like life, business, just achievement in general, whether it's in your relationship, in business, whatever, is a matter of like your will versus God's will. This is something I battle with personally, of like, how much of life do I take into my own hands, which is always what I want to do. I mean, my identity has been an achiever. And when I look at the history of my life, all good things have come from me doing something that was very uncomfortable, like putting myself out there, like making it happen. Like I think about my last relationship, which ended, but it was beautiful. And I reflect back on like those breakthrough moments. What did I do that created the breakthrough to have this beautiful relationship, this and that? And I was thinking about it the other day. I was like, well, I met a girl. I thought she was beautiful. I knew there was something deep about her. And my mind said, no, don't do it. Don't ask her out. But there was something in me that was like, no, I have to ask her out. And I trusted like that bigger part of me that didn't want to just like default to a program, I'll call it, like a
safe,
passive, safe. Yeah. So I look at business that way. And as I've grown spiritually, there's been seasons of passivity in my business, and it annoys me because I'm like, am I really doing the will of God by not trying to grow more skills, be a better marketer, impact more people? So it's like, what's that dance between like God's will and our will? And I mean, like, you're a priest, right? So there's, yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts about that, because I think it's like spiritual men struggle with this idea.
First, at least my experience has always been that there seems to be seasons for everything.
Life's very
So,
cyclical, for sure.
Yeah, so it's sort of cyclical. And in fact, I think I heard Alex Hormozy talk about this. So you're either growing,
The fact
or
that you listen to Alex Hormozy, I just love that.
yeah.
That is
Occasionally,
awesome.
occasionally the guy he has a knack for putting real truth in pithy.
Well, you know, he was going to be a monk.
Is he going to be a monk?
He was going to be.
Oh, he was going to be a monk.
Contemplated the path of being a
Okay,
monk.
that I didn't know. But he has this. He has this way of the very pithy one-liners, which I dearly love, because the fathers of the desert collected. The sayings of the desert fathers are pithy one-liners, and I've always loved that literature. And I've been collecting one-liners and little brief proverbs and sayings for decades, just because I find them, they're so densely packed. And he does that, and so I get a great deal of joy when he drops a one-liner that's just like, yes, it's
Right,
so
right.
perfect. But Hormozy had said, even in business, that I think you're either growing or you're learning. So you can't push all the time, and you need to step back a little bit. On that, a story from St. Anthony the Great. Some pilgrim came to see Abba Anthony, who of course was the father of monasticism, this great hermit who drew a huge community around himself, and came to see him. And it was Sunday, and all of the hermits would come to the monastery for Saturday night vigil services, and then Sunday morning liturgy. They would all share the meal after the liturgy, and then the hermits would go back to their cells. They'd gather up dried bread or a book or whatever they needed and go back to their cells for the week. And Abba Anthony was sitting after lunch, hanging out with the bros and chewing the fat. And this pilgrim had come to see the great Abba Anthony. He says, "What is this? This is the great Abba Anthony kicking back with the brothers." And he knew what the guy was thinking. Okay, he was clairvoyant. And he said to the man, if you have an archer, the archer knows that when you're not using the bow, you have to take the bowstring off and loosen it, because if you keep the bowstring taut all the time, it grows brittle and it will break.
Wow.
So the purpose of the story is to say, you can't be tense and, screwed tight all the time. You need to be able to relax and to kick back a bit. So if you're being lazy in your business, then okay, correct yourself. Your conscience will accuse you if that's genuinely the case. But there may be some seasons where you just can't run anymore and you need to coast, or where you need to take a step back and relax, or sometimes even to let ideas ferment, and sort of the soil needs to lay fallow for a little while before something new can grow. So cutting yourself a little slack and not laying an additional layer of expectation on yourself, which only ratchets up your anxiety. So try to be at peace and have some discernment about that. With regards to our will and God's will, I think a lot of people seem to think that somehow God is going to zap you with an understanding of what his will is for your life.
Oh, for sure.
And that you will know, God will speak to you and say, this is what you need to do.
Right. Wouldn't that be nice?
It would be nice. I think I kind of had, and some people get that.
Right, for sure.
I think I had something like that.
Oh, wow.
Which is why I'm a priest to this day. I had an experience when I was 15.
Wow.
That's somewhat of a revelation.
That's awesome.
And I knew there was a God. And it engendered in me this intense gratitude, and I've lived the rest of my life as a Christian out of gratitude for that moment.
Wow. 15.
I was 15. Maybe I'll tell you the story when I'm done with this little bit. But I think for the most part, a lot of people don't get a real clear direction of what God's will is. And so I think what we do is, as St. Paul says, Christ is our foundation. And so we need to, and he says, be careful what you build on that foundation. You want to build on the foundation with gold, silver, and precious stones, not with hay, straw, and stubble. So build something worthwhile with your life, but build it on Christ. And Christ is the cornerstone. So if Christ is the cornerstone, that means everything you build is in alignment with Christ. So I think as long as what you do in your relationships, in your business, in your vocation, so long as they're in alignment with the gospel, go with it and run. And I think for a lot of men, part of the mistake is waiting for clarity before they set out. You don't get clarity until you start on the journey.
That's so true.
Then you can self-correct
That's so true.
while you're on the, but there's no data until you start. So maybe you start this way and realize, oh hell, that's actually the wrong way. I need to be going that way. Now you know. You would never know if you're sitting there hemming and hawing and, shaking your hands. Oh, what am I supposed to do? I don't know where to begin.
Right.
Jazz hands and all. So go. And then course correct along the way. And so long as we have Christ as the gospel as our anchor, and and we're measuring that what we're doing, our conscience is clean in the way we're running our business and relating to people and providing genuine value to them, then over time we'll get clearer and clearer on what we're supposed to be doing. I think that's as close as we can come. But we need to start, and we need to hit the ground running, and again, work hard and do the most that we can. And then, see what God blesses.
Yeah. Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, I think that provides a lot of clarity, because I think I mean, speaking for myself, I mean, I've like battled with perfectionism, and that has been insanely destructive, because it's like you try to be, first of all, you beat yourself up so much in your head before you even take a step, where what you're saying, it sounds like, just trust the step, screw the plan unfolds while you step. The plan unfolds.
You have a general idea.
Right, you have an idea.
Yeah, you have an idea.
But it doesn't need to be this elaborate, perfect thing, and then you execute. It's like you just keep adjusting as you go. Because I think,
based on real life data, rather than trying to fantasize about
right.
where I might go wrong or what people want or what might be the best product, put it out there. So it requires a bit of courage. And again, Hormozy talks about this, but I forget others. Who wrote the book? Was it John Maxwell? You either learn or you either win or you learn. Yes. It's not you win or you fail. Yes. Every failure is an opportunity for learning. So there's a kind of resilience that those of us with perfectionism kind of resist, because we don't want to fail. We're embarrassed as hell to fall on our faces.
Right.
I mean, it's like the worst thing.
Right.
And you have to get over that. And hold your own ego a little more lightly. And if you can laugh at yourself, all the better.
Yes, amen.
But at least you can go into, oh, Lordy, that blew up in my face. I ain't doing that again.
Yeah.
And okay, that's data. Don't do that.
Right.
Okay, that's one less option, so it narrows the field of what we can do. Yes. So continue to do that, but be willing to fail. And that's, I found for me, that was one of the most difficult things.
Yeah. You got to be willing to not make it work.
Yeah, and for it not to work, or to put out the lousy video or the crappy social media, or whatever product that you're going to put out. You launch and then you iterate based on real world results and what people actually want and what people actually respond to. So for myself, I have an online course. I've got a little community I want to start later this year, and we'll see what sticks. If men like it, well and good. If they don't, I'll find out what they don't like, what's lame, what's unappealing, and then we'll iterate again.
Yeah, that's the name of the game. I was have you ever read Robert Greene at all?
Mm-hmm.
48 Laws of Power, Mastery. 48 Laws of Power is a bit much for me, but Mastery is great. I think it's his best book by far. I'm rereading it right now. Okay. And he was saying you should go into he was saying that, to rise to master, you're gonna have to learn new skills.
Yes.
You're gonna have to. And it's not gonna be comfortable, because it's not natural. It's like bodybuilding.
Yes.
Before someone steps in a gym, it's weird. It's wonky. You feel kind of awkward. You're sore for 3 days. Then after a couple of years, it's like you barely get sore. It's natural. You don't even think about it because it gets to a deeper part of your brain. He's talking about that. But he was saying that for the person like in the pursuit of mastery, look at it like just a big art project. Like there's no right or wrong. Like you're just continuously going forward. You're going to make some mistakes, but instead of looking at it like you're failing, it's like an adventure. It's like, hey, this is a dip in the roller coaster. I'm going to go on the way up again.
Yes.
But it's just this ride. I was just reading that last night. I was like, wow, that really resonates, because I'm at a point in my business too where it's like I've been doing it for almost a decade, and I need to switch it up. I need to change the way I've done it for so long, because social media is different, the world's different, I'm different, what I want to offer is different. So I was like, the start is what stops most people. It's like I've been thinking about this for a year before I've even taken an action. And I've just kind of kicked my butt in gear, and a lot of that was downstream from our conversations. But it was like, dude, you're not going to be perfect. Like, why do you, like, just because you have a decade here doesn't mean you're going to start this tomorrow and all of a sudden be so good at it. It's like, you're going to have to just enjoy this adventure of learning and be like he kind of says, like, a innocent child. Like, you're not judging it. You're just going with it to learn. And in the back of your mind, you're saying, hey, I'm doing this so that I can serve more. Because that was the big thing, is like attaching it to a bigger motivation. Because like I'm just not motivated by money. Like that stuff doesn't motivate me. It's like I want to serve, I want to impact, I want to make a difference in people's lives. That's what fuels me. So it's like tapping into that while you're just like kind of figuring out this crazy roller coaster ride it's a beautiful way to live, and it gets you going. So you're not so in your head so much.
I like that. I remember the mental shift from this is a pain to adventure. I remember when my kids were young, and we would take car trips or whatnot. Kids get bored in the car. I remember being a young kid and bored in the car, and the clever ways my mother had of shutting us up for 10 miles, for 20 miles and whatnot.
Oh, gosh.
But whenever things would get a little long or something, I would just say, adventure! And it got to where the boys would both respond, adventure! Even if it was miserable, especially if it was miserable, I would shout adventure. If it started raining or there's a traffic backup or adventure, adventure. And it sort of changed the whole mood that, okay, this is not what we planned, but here it is. And I sort of do the same thing. And I have to remind myself about it now, because you're right. My website died earlier this year. So having to rebuild my website, I put it on Kajabi. Like I say, there's some things I want to sell. So I've had to set up the marketing and set up a Stripe account to accept money. Do you know what has been the biggest bugbear for me lately? Oddly, recurrent payments. Setting up recurrent payments in Stripe has for some reason loomed like this huge insurmountable ogre of a problem. It's not. But I have it in my head. No, I want to do men's work. I want to help men to optimize their lives. I want to do this. I don't want to have to figure out how to make recurrent payments in Stripe.
Right.
Somehow this is beneath me, and it's technical and it's gross, and I don't want to do it. It's just something else I got to learn. And if I'm going to do this business, that's one of the, roll up your sleeves and, be willing to get a little greasy, at it. And of all things,
recurring payments. No,
payments.
it's so funny, because like me or my brother, we could do that in 5 minutes, right? It's like, but it's funny because I was just thinking about this literally because I'm reading Mastery, so this is kind of in my head right now. The subtitles on social media videos, like the words that pop up while you're speaking. Yeah. So I used to do that.
Captions?
Yeah, the captions. Probably, let's see, 2017, 2016 maybe. What is it, 2025? Yeah, 2016, 2017. I was doing that manually in an editing software. So I'd have like a minute video, and I would be transcribing it myself.
Yeah.
Here's the craziest thing. I didn't have to do that. There was tools available to me that would have shortcutted my process. I stayed in that for like 2 years doing that. So a 60-second video would take me all day.
All day to edit.
All day.
Yeah.
And it's like, I look at that now and I don't think, wow, that guy was such an idiot. He could have did it this way. I just have more wisdom now, and I look back at that and be like, oh, well, he could have did it a different way. But guess what? He figured it out. He doesn't even edit the videos anymore. Like the team does it. So I'm looking at that same innocence into what I'm trying to do now, which is like, dude, you're literally not going to do it well. You're not going to do it right. And you're going to figure out in 2 years from now, you could have did it a million times better. But guess what? Most people never start.
And you won't have that wisdom until
you learn.
Do it in 2 years and look back, and then you'll know.
You got to get your hands dirty.
Yeah.
Like, you just got to.
And you have
There's no avoiding.
And I think a lot of male pride just does not want to admit that we really suck at something.
Oh my gosh, yeah, horrible.
So I reached a point in my life. So, but a funny example, there are things, people who are good at everything are loathsome.
True.
They really are.
They're very true.
So my wife had wanted to play golf for years. A couple of her sisters play golf, and I just resisted because I knew I was afraid I'd get addicted to it. And then I would spend all of my money on green fees and lessons. I would neglect my parish. The parish would fall apart. My wife would turn to drink because I was never home.
That's hilarious.
So everything would fall apart if I started golf. So this was my rationale. But 2 years ago for our anniversary, I gave us golf lessons. It says, I'll pay for us for lessons. This is my gift to you. We'll have 4 lessons. If we like it, I'll buy us clubs and we'll play golf. And we loved it. And my condition for myself was that I will go into this knowing that I am going to suck at golf. And I always will. And I will be lousy at it. And that's okay.
Yes.
And to this day, I've been playing now in my 3rd year. I have not made par on a single hole yet, which is really bad. But my wife enjoys it, and I like being out with her, and it's okay. I'm great at everything else, but I'm bad at golf.
That's awesome.
And so that makes me tolerable. So just being willing to be bad at something, and again, maybe it comes with age and a little less ego, where you can just laugh at yourself.
Yeah, life's not as serious as we take it.
No,
it's really not.
And I found that, maybe it's just age and wisdom, but there's a lot to laugh at in me.
Yeah.
And if I could be really uptight about stuff, but it's just not worth it anymore.
No.
And it's not a matter of sweating small stuff. It's just, if I didn't laugh, I'd have to weep. And I don't want to weep over this stuff. Yeah. Let it go. It's not that important.
I feel like when people find God, Christ, they're usually probably at like a lower state, I would have to imagine. At least for me, like it just seemed like things were really bad, and God met me at my ugliest and still accepted me and loved me. But in like coming back home and like getting back into the church and like looking at Anton through a new lens, it was like I had to almost give myself permission to just be slow at something. Like take the time to learn about the church and go internally with Christ, and just not judge the process like, oh, I need to be enlightened tomorrow.
To respect it.
Yeah, just
respect the journey.
Respect the journey. And it was almost like I was judging my level of how Christian am I. And it was just so stupid when I reflect back, and I'm like, you're so silly, man. Just embrace the journey. And I feel like so many men just need like the permission to start and fail and go forward and keep going. Like I look at jiu-jitsu, and I've been training jiu-jitsu now for over 2 years. And when I started, I was horrible. I got submitted every time. There was no chance I would ever win. I've competed 3 times now. I've won multiple times in competitions. And for my self-confidence, who I didn't grow up athletic, like I wasn't an athlete. I didn't play football in high school. For me, it was like, wow, progress. And that does something to a man.
Oh, yeah.
But so many men don't think they can progress because they're taking like this small period and not realizing like how much they can do. We overestimate what we can do in 1 year, but we underestimate what we can do in 10.
Yes.
And that is so true. Like I think of myself 10 years ago in my business, in my health, in my spirituality. Gosh, I knew nothing.
Yeah, you knew nothing. Yeah, it's true. And this is something I tell guys when they start working out, and I say, and I encourage working out, either pumping iron or a martial art, I think.
Or both.
Or both. I mean, if you've got time and effort, if you're young and strong and you have the time to do it, God bless you. pumping iron myself. I prefer a little better, but an engaged combat sport, I think there are things that it teaches you that you never learn anywhere else.
Oh no.
And that's valuable too. But as you said, like at least with working out, they say you won't notice change in your body for a month. Your closest friends and family will not notice a change for 2 months. The rest of the world is not going to notice for 3 months. So you're going to be in this for a while. What are the immediate fruits of working out? You make a plan. You have to stick to a plan. You delay gratification because you're not going to see progress. You learn to work through pain. You learn to grind when it seems like nothing's happening, or you haven't lost an ounce in 2 weeks, though you've been strict with your diet. You learn that progress is not linear. You learn all of these things, and those are extremely important. And those attitudes and skills, can be fungible across every aspect of your life. If you can learn to grind in the gym, you can learn to grind in your business. Yes. It's not automatic, but it's the same mindset.
Principles.
And you can do that.
Yes.
So, yeah, if you want a place, and actually results in the gym are fairly quick to appear. I mean, even if you just start out, okay, this week you can only lift 20 pounds. Next week, wow, 25 seems easy. That's a 25% increase in strength right there.
Right.
Yeah.
Eventually
it plateaus, but newbie gains are real, and that's
for sure.
And that's a real encouragement, for
it's
guys.
Like a little grace in the beginning.
Make it a little easy. Everything, the weights just blossom up, as you can gain neurological proficiency at what you're doing. Yeah, it's a beautiful thing, and then it just goes.
Yeah.
You're stuck.
Stagnant for 5 years.
Stagnant for 5 years. Yeah.
Yeah, so, you've been a priest for 30 years. You've heard thousands of confessions. That's insane. Like, what would you say is a sin, a problem that men are facing, like confessionally? Like, what is something you're noticing or notice over multiple decades of doing this? Is there like a pattern of like things you've noticed in men where it's just like, man, that always is holding them up and hurting them?
Overall, and it's not surprising, and I'm not telling stories outside of confession when I say this.
No, of course not. Nothing specific about individuals.
As you can imagine, for a large number of men, the porn addiction thing is an issue, but we all know that broadly. So, I mean, is it reasonable that you would hear that come up in confession? Yes. The most original observation that I had by way of trends in confession, I've mentioned to my congregation. It actually started about 8 or 9 years ago. It was in the election season when Trump and Clinton were getting up to the election when Trump was elected the first time.
Oh, Hillary Clinton.
Hillary Clinton, Hillary.
Bill Clinton.
No, Hillary. So Trump and Hillary, I guess.
Right.
Anyway, it was in that election cycle where they were campaigning and the political ads were out and all of this, and it was the big slugfest and all of that. And, this is no reflection on politics, but I noticed that everyone's confession changed.
Huh.
People began confessing hate.
Wow.
No one confessed to hate before. I mean, occasionally, you could imagine,
right.
But
you're going to see the pattern.
The new wife complaint, complaining
sure.
about, my husband's ex-wife, she's causing us trouble again. I hate that woman. She's filed for more child support, whatever it is. You can imagine something like that. That was like the only kind of situation where anyone would confess to hate. But it became very common that summer. I hate Trump. I hate Clinton. I hate Muslims. I hate blacks. I hate Jews. I hate. And I finally saw it. I said, this is really strange. I finally confronted my congregation with it, and I said, listen, I'm hearing way too much of this. Who taught you to hate? And they were taught to hate by the news and by social media. That was the beginning of the real divisions in this country. I don't care what your politics are.
Oh, you're 100% right.
That is pure defecated evil. And as a result of that, and also because of the rising political tensions in the country and all, sins associated with self-medication went through the roof.
Like prescription drugs, marijuana, alcohol.
Marijuana, porn use, drug use, alcohol, just general confessions of people who are anxious, depressed, increased like anger, snapping at people, snapping at my kids, I yelled at my wife, stuff like that from people who didn't typically, because by this I had known everybody for a few years, and I sort of knew what everybody's temperament was and all, but so when people change, you kind of begin, but I mean, it was no individual, it was like across the board, like everybody's stress level went through the roof, and I realized, okay, these are all sins related to self-medicating from stress, and this is what the world is doing to us. And it encouraged me to encourage, and this is, I preach this now regularly whenever we have a fasting season in the church. Not only do we fast according to the holy canons from meat and dairy products, I mean, what we eat in our diet. It's also a digital fast that I insist on. It says you get off your phone, you get off social media, you quit doom scrolling, you quit watching television, no news, no social media, and see what it's like to be peaceful again, and for your anxiety levels to go down. And for the people that can do it, it's like, oh my God, Father, I forgot what it was like to be peaceful. I can go to sleep and have a good night's sleep now. I enjoyed my children's company. Just stuff like that.
Right,
it was
simples.
like ordinary, human, simple things.
Right.
But the constant scrolling on the phone, and they're designed to be addictive. So learning to separate, from the addictive behavior, which is difficult. I admit that.
Well, the algorithm is against you.
The algorithm is against you.
It's literally designed to feed you what you love and the opposite. Yeah. And it knows.
It does know.
So it's trying to trigger you emotionally, because then you stay on it. Oh, that mother effer. You comment, you this, you that.
Yes.
I mean, this is what I've done for a decade. Obviously, I haven't used it like that, thank God.
Yeah.
But I understand how unattached the editors are. They look at it as like a number. Like, oh, well, if it gets 1,000 comments, it's a great piece. But they're not equating it to the humanness that, hey, this is affecting people emotionally in a very negative way. Just because you're hitting your numbers doesn't mean you're doing a service to society.
No, maybe you're just provoking people to reactionary behavior.
It's like base level instincts, is like the lowest form of humanity. Yeah, that's really fascinating to me. It makes a lot of sense, and I love how you were kind of able to catch that pattern of like that anger coming up for people, because I'd say it's still there.
It is
you got
still
a polarizing
there.
figure like Trump, and that's gonna provoke a lot of people.
Or a polarizing figure like Biden, even.
Right,
I mean,
Biden,
really, it's really been about the last 10 years, things have really separated out, regardless of your politics.
Right,
because
right. I'm not political at all.
The only reason, that sort of the radical left exists is because there's a radical right, at the same time, and they just go at each other, hammer and tongs, And, if one side shut up, the other side wouldn't have anything to do.
Very true.
It would sort of go away.
Yeah, my thought with politics was always like, I mean, I'm a little young and naive, but I had a mentor at a really young age kind of just tell me like, look, don't listen to the news. Like, do you need to be informed about all of this stuff? Like, does it really change your life? Does it make you a better person? Does it make you happier?
No, it doesn't.
And it doesn't. It just doesn't.
It doesn't.
And it just distracts you, really.
I remember one analysis of the sort of the 24-hour news cycle, once we had sort of CNN and we had cable news, which was on 24/7. There's just not enough news to go on. So you end up reporting on, terrible things that happen in some far corner of the world, which I'm not downplaying the human tragedy of it, but there's only so much emotional bandwidth that I have for, earthquakes, floods, famines, fire, the sword, foreign invasion, civil war, sudden death, terrorist assault, and plague of disease that goes on in every corner of the world. It's overwhelming, and after a while, you just sort of emotionally shut down. And it drives people's anxiety through the roof.
And it primes them throughout the day.
Yeah.
It's like you get this primer in the morning. Oh, the world's this evil, horrible place. Well, how can
Because,
you expect to?
Because if it bleeds, it leads. you know?
Yes,
Yeah, that's that old
exactly.
newspaper,
So
that old
true.
newspaper line.
If it bleeds, it leads. Yeah,
So,
that's very
but
true.
you're right. But okay, you don't like Trump. What can you do about it?
Right. It is
It's not
what
a
it is.
blessed thing.
Right.
So how does it affect your life, really, materially? Are you not going to make as much money as you can because of what the present administration might or might not do with regards to taxes? No, you're going to do the best that you can. You know, if you're going to
Always
raise
figure it
your
out.
family, are you not going to have children because of who's in office?
Yes, that's a big one too right now.
Apparently, some people are willing to do that.
Crazy.
And I heard that there's an overwhelming number of like women on the left who will not consider dating a man on the right. Something like 69%.
It goes both ways, but yeah.
Does it really? I had
Oh,
only seen, I think
absolutely.
it was much more one way than the
I
other.
mean,
at least
I
the
could see
report.
it that way,
I
but
can see it both ways.
you know,
but
I lean obviously more conservative, but I've heard men say, you know, I would never date a liberal. I actually find liberal girls kind of sometimes really sweet in a lot of ways because they actually sometimes have a little bit more empathy. I found they're just a little, in my opinion, a little brainwashed to how that is exercised, but
Yeah.
they're actually sometimes really kind. I met this really sweet Orthodox, Russian Orthodox girl, and when she found out, you know, I wasn't a Biden fan, there was a lot of tension. But I tried to understand her perspective, and I learned a lot actually, because I realized, you know, her whole things was like, well, guns is evil, and I'm like, well, why? And essentially, what I realized is that we both had a belief that we wanted to protect each other.
yeah,
Just the outcome or the way that
means.
the means was different.
Yes.
It's like she believed no guns is a net positive because children don't get shot up in schools and all this stuff. I believed guns is a positive to protect the person from shooting up the school. So it's like we both have the same idea, help the children.
and you see, and here is something that is
fascinating.
lost in contemporary discourse. I mean, I'm old enough to remember where it was broadly understood. They may not put it quite so technically as I'm going to say it, but it was broadly understood that politics is a matter of prudence, which means that persons of goodwill can disagree on the means of achieving a goal without hating on the other person. And, you know, this is why a lot of people don't like politics, because politics is the art of the possible. So you have to make compromises. And no, we are rigidly on our side, and this is the side of righteousness, and anyone who disagrees is not only wrong, but evil.
Right.
And you
So
cannot
ridiculous.
compromise with evil.
Right.
And this is you know, it's this sort of reactionary absolutizing of political positions that's not helping anybody. You know, I mean, John Kennedy himself, you know, said if you can't get a whole loaf, settle for half a loaf. You know, and it's good advice. And to this day, it's rare that I get to have one, but to have a genuine, engaged conversation with someone of a radically different political persuasion than me, and to be able to have a principled discussion and disagree and talk about the reasons why without emotions getting inflamed, it's a beautiful thing.
It is.
It's fabulous.
I actually
and
learned
we
the
used
most
to
in
do
those
that.
conversations.
Yeah, and you know, those were much more common 15 years ago. They really were. And regrettably, this is where we are now.
Yeah, I heard Tony Robbins say something almost identical, where he was saying how, you know, 20 years ago, you know, he's coached all the presidents. He's been doing this for,
Yeah.
I think he's on his almost 50th year of being like a life coach. And he was talking about how
He does look a bit old, I will say that.
yeah, he's almost 70.
Okay.
He's getting up there. He looks great though, either way. But to go at that level for that long, I don't know how he does it. But what I was saying was that, dang it, I forgot my train of thought. Oh yeah, what he was saying is that like 20 years ago, he'd coach. I forget the actual you know people that were running, but it was like he would coach the Republican, and then later that evening
Yeah, the same
he'd be
day.
coaching the Democrat.
I love
And
it. Yeah.
there was that wasn't a conflict because it was just different times. And then he was saying like after they'd have their whole election and whatnot. They'd go get a beer with each other
Yeah.
and talk it out.
Oh, yeah.
That would
this used
never
to be a
happen
thing.
today.
No, and this used to be a thing. I think it does in some respects, but that used to be an old thing. I remember, they're talking about, senators, hammering out, like the famous example, back in the 60s when they were hammering out civil rights legislation, and they were, just slinging it. It was a slugfest in the Senate, and, they'd either come to a vote or they'd finish the debate or whatnot. They'd all go out for a beer at the end, They were all friends because they were arguing the issue, not the person.
Not the person.
And
It's
they
become
recognized,
personal now.
yeah, the politics is personal. We got that from feminism.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. And no, they were arguing principle. They all wanted what was best for the country, and they recognized that. And that's a very good basis,
It is.
to de-escalate a lot of conflicts. And once you sort of can presume, I always presume the goodwill of the other person until they demonstrate to me that they're not a person of goodwill.
Yes.
You know what?
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. I think, I believe for the most part, usually all behavior has a positive intent. You probably learned this in psychology school.
Yeah, it's Aristotle.
Right. I mean, I really believe that.
Everybody seeks the good.
Everyone has a reason for why they do things, and they're trying to meet some type of need, and we may not agree with how they're fulfilling it, but it doesn't mean they're a bad person. It's like,
no,
they can make bad decisions, but they're not a bad person in essence. But let's talk about courage. I know it's a big one for you. Courage. It was funny. Before I was a Christian, I was always drawn to masculine courage.
Okay.
Like I had this innate understanding in my soul that somehow that was a godly quality. And it was like Mel Gibson and Braveheart, Decimus Meridius, Maximus, and Gladiator.
Yes. Oh, yes.
It was like, these are my movies. And it was like my soul resonated with it. And I didn't even know it was pointing to a Christian theme, really. Dying for what you believe in, it's Christ on the cross, dying for our sins. So how important is courage for men?
Foundational, fundamental, because courage is really the basis of all of our action. In the classical understanding, it is the perfection of part of the soul, the part of our soul that strives, that has zeal, that presses outward, that if you'll allow the metaphor, penetrates the world. And without courage, we don't do that. We stay stuck in ourselves or, passive or whatnot. And a lot of times, as we were talking earlier, a lot of us don't do stuff because we're afraid. It's what kept me from so much. And honestly, I haven't said this yet in this talk, but one of the fundamental motivations for me for doing this men's work is because I live with a huge amount of regret.
Wow.
Because there are things I didn't do that I lost years, if not decades of my life, and benefit and experiences and goodness because I was scared, or I didn't know how, or I didn't know the people, I didn't have the contacts. And I live with regret now at 64 years old. And so I want to help you younger guys. If I can save you years of pain and misery and regret and diminished lives and get you up and running better, your lives will be so much better. If I can help one man, then all of this is worthwhile. Okay, so that's it. It's a negative thing, but regret drives me because I lacked courage. And courage is, for men, the first virtue. One of the things which I didn't see anybody else do, so I'm going to take originality on this, is that I realized that Robert Moore's 4 principal male archetypes of king, magician, warrior, and lover line up exactly with the classical virtues of courage, moderation, prudence, and justice. They line up exactly. And they are a psychological way of saying what the ancient philosophers said about courage. So courage correlates with warrior energy, or the warrior archetype. What Moore points out in his work, and I think he's correct, is that is the first archetype that comes online for men, that hits about puberty, in your teenage years.
100%.
Surge of testosterone, puberty hits, we start pressing the world, we start moving to the edges of the village, we start acting out, we start asserting our independence, we start get physically strong, we get interested in women, that whole sort of attitude of conquest and all begins to express itself in a lot of ways. And if that's not adequately channeled, then guys get into trouble.
Truth.
You either go off the deep end on one side and you become aggressive or promiscuous or whatnot, or it's not affirmed and doesn't have any support, in which you become kind of passive, is suppressed, very much a nice guy, classic nice guy here. And I think a lot of guys, because masculine attributes and characteristics are demonized nowadays, a lot of guys do not grow fully into their courage.
100%. And part of that too, we talked about briefly, is there's no rituals.
And there's no ritual for it.
Yep.
Yeah. And so opportunities to draw out. And courage is the willingness and the ability to act even in the face of fear, in the face of uncertainty. So like you were talking earlier about, sort of hesitating, dithering with regards to your business. You know what you need to do, but you just can't get yourself to do it. Goes back to a lack of courage in one respect.
So true.
Yeah. So, and remember that, for the ancients, the Greeks, mezon ariston, moderation is best, they always said, because for them, any virtue was the midpoint between two evil extremes. So courage is the midpoint between cowardice and rashness.
Wow, I love that.
So, a lot of guys say, courageous, I'm just going to jump in, and just fly into it, and just slash and burn and, whatnot. And, that's how the movies show it, and all. Sorry, that's like stupidity multiplied there, So courage is, and here's where actually all the virtues have to come together. There's ultimately only one virtue, because we can be courageous, but we need to be moderate in how courageous we are. We need to be prudent, know where we need to be courageous and to what extent. We need to assert ourselves. We need to be just, because we don't want to offend other people or violate someone else's rights or go too far, respond too aggressively or not respond enough. You have to meet a situation with an appropriate amount of courage. So it all gets wrapped up together. But fundamentally, if you're unwilling to step out, and the way that I put it, it was, I think actually, David Data put it in his book, The Way of the Superior Man.
Oh, classic.
At least the first 15 chapters.
I'll
give you that.
Funny at the end there.
Well, yeah, towards the end. Yeah, I won't repeat the phrases that kind of fall off the deep end for me. But the first 15 chapters,
so good,
where a man, finds his edge, and what he talks about living at your edge. So leaning into your fear, pushing your edge, is, I think, one of the most beautiful images of what it means. Because don't you know that's where you come alive?
Yeah. So true.
Trying for a PR in the gym. What a transcendent moment.
Oh, that's awesome.
Or finally launching, getting up the courage, hitting send. Whatever it is, you're terrified of it, but you do it anyway, and it's just. You don't feel more alive, but when you are at that moment.
Something so masculine about that.
There really is. There really is. And putting yourself out there, come what may. And it's scary, but it's exhilarating at the same time. It's very complex. But we need courage to do that. And the world needs men to step up, because I think we said earlier, the world is not served by any of us playing small. And like I say, it's not a matter of being rash or being inconsiderate of anybody else. But an appropriate degree, if you want, call it assertiveness, if you don't want to speak about courage. And assertiveness is putting yourself out there, standing up for your own beliefs, your own feelings, but fully respecting the rights and the feelings and the opinions of the person you're dealing with. That's what keeps it from being just raw aggression, where you just don't you don't give a damn about what the other person feels, and you're just going to try to run roughshod over them, or just assert yourself to, and without caring what the effects on anyone else. No, as a Christian man, we have to take all that into account. But I can still say, my heart is not at peace with what you're doing, or this offends my sense of justice. I don't think you're you're acting in good faith. You know, the way I see you conducting your business is not something that I care to be a part of, therefore I choose not to do business with you anymore. You know, or there's any of a number of situations where you can be courageous, without attacking the other person, but standing up for yourself and putting yourself forward that accomplishes something good. And, at the end of the day, you ought to be able to sleep with your conscience. And I think that's a big component of it as well. So, and if you can learn to be courageous, and again, this goes back to either working out in the gym or especially with martial arts, which involves a combat element. I mean, I did classical Okinawan karate. We did very little kumite or Sparring.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's the word, sparring. We did very little sparring, which I'm sorry for now. But like something like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which has got massive popularity.
Oh yeah, they just created a UFC for it.
There you go.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, Dana. He's
All
making
right.
moves.
So, I mean, to put
great
yourself
sport.
in there and to go in there, it will crush your ego.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
To be submitted every single time for weeks on end
It's crazy.
by some slight little 16-year-old girl.
Right, that's the worst. Because
I-
it's
I-
all
I
about
know-
technique.
Yeah, I know a guy who sparred with a 16-year-old girl who had him down and under. And he was a full-grown man. He was in his 30s. Full-grown man,
hilarious.
submitted for weeks on end until finally he got her down. It was
Yeah.
like the greatest day of his life.
Yeah, literally.
But you're right, it's technique. But for a lot of guys, no, I'm big,
Right, they
I'm
try to
strong,
muscle
I
it.
can force this. And
It doesn't go very far.
it doesn't. No, it doesn't. But to put yourself out there like that and allow yourself to be humbled. It reminds me, there was this poem by Rilke. What was it? It started out about a storm, and he goes on and he goes on to say, it's sort of like those guys who wrestled angels in the Old Testament. You could, he could feel, your sinews under your skin, and it was like chords of deep music, grabbing you by the sinews and all. And he said, whoever wrestled with that angel went away stronger. And sometimes he even refused to fight. But if you fought with him, you would go away stronger. And he says, and this is how that man grows, by being defeated by greater and greater things.
Yes.
My God,
That's so
it's
true.
absolutely right. We have
That's
to
so
allow
good.
ourselves to be defeated. Ultimately, to be even to be defeated by God, and be willing to wrestle with Him. And there is a very masculine way of prayer, and genuinely wrestling with God, and that requires being, brutally honest with your feelings in prayer. And maybe I'll get in trouble for saying this, but I think an honest prayer where you're really, really willing to wrestle with God and sometimes be angry because we don't understand.
100%.
David did it, in the Psalms. Some of his,
Oh my
some
gosh,
of his
crying
Psalms.
out.
And he's really ticked at God and lets him know it.
Yeah.
But because it was honest and from the heart, I think it was an excellent prayer. But if we can be that raw, I think much comes out of it. And in the end, we will be defeated. He'll put us down. But he will do it in a way, it says, it's a fearful thing to fall into the hands of the living God. Why? Because he will break us.
Yeah.
But see, this is the thing, and maybe this is a good way to wrap it up. This is where the image of the Eucharist comes to be reflected in human life. Because what happens in the Eucharist is what needs to happen with each of our hearts. God accepts us. Like you remember the story, multiplication of loaves and fishes. John's account, because the boy had barley loaves. He didn't have wheat. He had cheapest possible bread made out of barley because it was so poor. The Lord takes it. He accepts it. He doesn't care where we are, where we start. He accepts us.
Wow.
We're his beloved sons.
Yes.
He accepts us. He takes us. He blesses it. We like that part, but then he breaks it. And that's where all of us say, oh, wait, time out. Thank you. I don't want to go there. But the only thing that gets broken is what's sinful, what's already broken, what's all ego, what doesn't serve us, what doesn't serve the gospel, what's inauthentic. and passionate and wrong. That's what gets broken. And it hurts like hell.
Yeah, because part of you has to die.
Part of you has to die. But it's not until you are broken, it's not until the bread is broken that it can be given out to nourish everybody around us. And then it's multiplied, and you find that it's not just the people around you, but it ramifies out. That's how our lives are multiplied. And we cannot have that ramification. We cannot have that large influence until we're broken. And if we resist that, our efforts will come short.
So beautiful.
So it's not easy. No. It's really scary.
Yeah, it is.
And for most of us, we have to be forced into it by circumstances.
That's sure.
We will not change until we're compelled to. Wow. But if we can have the grace, I remember particularly the first time I learned the lesson, it was a very low point in my life. Things were, it was never bad in my marriage, but the wife and I were a little bit out of sorts. We had a disagreement. And I just wanted to, in those days, this was, 20 plus years ago, I just wanted to get drunk. I just wanted to forget about everything. But I had someone in the hospital in intensive care, potentially going to die at any minute. It's heart trouble. So I couldn't drink anything because I had to be sober in case I had to run to the emergency room or to the hospital in the middle of the night. So I couldn't drink. I couldn't do this. I was, out of sorts with the wife and all. And I fell into this horrible funk. And I woke up the next morning and I was still in the funk. And I thought, typically I would try to drink or I'd do something to wiggle out of it. I would self-medicate. And I thought to myself, what would happen if I sat with this? What would happen if in those days I call it standing in the fire. What would happen if I just stood in the fire? And I said, okay, I'm just going to feel like hell for a while and see where this gets me. And I did, and it was just a few days, but I realized it didn't kill me. It's to the good. I didn't go crazy. Okay, that's to the good. But when I came out the other side of it, I sort of look back and say, okay, that was really bad, but I can do this. And somehow I was a much better man for it and much more mature and realized that I was made of sterner stuff.
Yeah.
And I was able to deal with issues much better as a result of it. So if we can quit running from ourselves and running from sometimes the harsh work that we need to do, we can make really significant strides in our life. So, to finish on a note of shameless self-promotion, that's the kind of stuff that I try to do, with men and with younger men. Try to help them to optimize their lives, to get their balls back, their hearts back, and their minds back so they can have the life and relationships they want.
I love that.
And to teach them, and everything that I do is based on the 4 virtues, and we always start with courage. And sometimes simply the courage to reach out for help and to be willing to accept it is the first step to making things better.
Amen. Well, Father Michael, thank you.
Ooh, this was fun.
This was beautiful. Everybody, I'm going to link his website below. Check him out. Give him a follow on social. And please be sure to like and subscribe.
Thank you, yes.
And I'll see you on the next one.
Much obliged.